The young man shot a turkey and glanced around cautiously, but he didn't notice the Native Americans watching from afar. If they were being tracked, it would spell disaster for his entire family, especially with 2 women in the house. That night, while the family was singing joyfully, a sudden scream from the yard broke the mood. It was the dog. The mother guessed it was wolves, but when she peered through the crack of the door, she saw more than a dozen Native Americans. Panic set in. They only had one person in the house who knew how to shoot. The mother warned, "They'll take you as captives." The knocking on the door grew more urgent. There was no time to think. No matter what, the mother knew there was no escape for her. After comforting her children, she opened the door. The moment the door opened, a Native American rushed in. Eli fired reflexively. In a blur, Eli could hear his mother screaming, the chaos of the invaders shouting. Then he was dragged outside and caught a glimpse of his sister's body. His brother was dragged out too, seething with rage, but there was nothing they could do. The house was set on fire. The 2 boys, strong and young, would be taken as slaves for now. Their lives would be spared, but what awaited them was endless torment. One brother's will to survive grew stronger, the other felt differently. Watching their mother and sister suffer became a permanent scar in his heart. At that moment, the older brother made a decision. He provoked the Native Americans on purpose. He got what he wanted. They prepared to kill him. Eli was dragged aside, beaten down again and again, but he kept getting up. The Native Americans respected courage. They buried the older brother in the grasslands. Eli was taken back to the tribe. His destiny would be far from ordinary. The boy was hung in the tribe, and a young woman holding firewood prepared to burn him alive. He was parched and begged for water, but she spat on him instead. Prairie Flower hated him. Then she grabbed a torch and lit the wood beneath him. The tribe began cheering as Eli struggled, but his resistance only excited them more. As the flames grew, a man named Toshaway stepped in. He couldn't bear to watch anymore. Toshaway put out the fire and saved Eli, but was immediately beaten up by the others. Afterward, Eli was forced to work with the women as a slave. Prairie Flower found everything about him annoying, constantly mocking him as useless, and beating him at the slightest mistake. Eli felt deeply wronged, but he didn't dare fight back. One day, while working, he got distracted watching the man. Prairie Flower saw it and came over with a switch, giving him another beating. Late at night, Eli, humiliated and angry, tried to steal a horse and escape, but Toshaway caught him. Toshaway warned him the white settlement was far, and he wouldn't make it. It wasn't just the distance. Eli couldn't even tell which direction was home. He said he'd rather die than be a slave, but Toshaway told him that living was better than dying. Time passed. Eli had been in the tribe for a long time and had finally learned how to skin animals properly, but Prairie Flower kept finding reasons to punish him. This time, remembering Toshaway's words, Eli refused to take it. He caught her switch midair, pinned her down, but didn't strike back. After that, he was finally welcomed into the circle of man. That night, Prairie Flower snuck into his tent and climbed on top of him. She had been conquered and everything happened naturally. After that, the tribe began to accept Eli. Toshaway started teaching him how to hunt. This was the Comanche way of survival. After watching others demonstrate, Eli thought he was ready, but he kept falling off the horse, which was still being held by others. Everyone laughed, because he was the weakest. He always had to carry the game back to camp. He loved this girl, but in public, they didn't dare show affection. Eli wasn't truly Comanche. Only at night could Prairie Flower sneak into his tent. That was their secret time together, but it wouldn't last. A man named Charges the Enemy had already proposed. Once he gathered 50 horses as dowry, Prairie Flower would no longer belong to Eli. Eli had to work harder to be recognized as Comanche and make sure Charges the Enemy didn't find out. One night, Prairie Flower left Eli's tent, unaware that Charges the Enemy had seen her. Eli's good days were numbered. Today was archery training for the Comanche. To test his courage, Eli was told to hold a small shield and act as a living target. Thankfully, all the arrows were headless. At first, Eli was afraid and mocked again, but after a few rounds, he stood firm. Then Charges the Enemy shot an arrow that grazed Eli's forehead. It had a sharp tip. Charges the Enemy claimed it was an accident. Furious, Eli charged like a bull, knocking him over. He had the upper hand briefly, then the stronger man pinned him down. Charges the Enemy began to strangle him, but Toshaway stepped in again and pulled him away.
You're not a Comanche yet. One day you might be, but for now you're my property. You're no different from one of my horses. If someone hurts you, you're not allowed to fight back. It's my job to protect you. You understand?
As Toshaway walked off, Eli asked, "When will I become Comanche?" Toshaway just smiled and said nothing. Herds of buffalo were slaughtered. but only their hides were taken. The real target seemed to be the Native Americans themselves. The Comanche depended on buffalo to live, and as white men killed more, life got harder. Young Comanche had never seen such scenes, even as a white man. Eli couldn't understand why his people did this. He had no defense for it. Suddenly, a group of rangers approached. They opened fire without hesitation. The Comanche had no chance and had to flee. Many were hit. Toshaway drew most of the fire himself. But still, many were captured. The Comanche sang songs to face death. Even though they were helpless, the white men showed no mercy. Meanwhile, Eli found a Comanche man with a broken leg, coughing up blood. The rangers were approaching. Eli covered the man's mouth. When they passed, Eli helped the man onto his horse. Looking back at his fallen horse, the man asked Eli to end its suffering. Eli killed the horse. Cautiously, they returned to the camp by nightfall, but the man didn't survive. Eli was devastated. With no buffalo and dwindling supplies, the tribe faced starvation. The chief proposed moving north with the buffalo, abandoning the settlement, but charges the enemy wanted to raid other tribes to gather horses faster. Major decisions were voted on. No one wanted to give up their home. Toshaway had to compromise. Their target, the Tonkawa, had joined forces with the whites and had guns and horses, but when they arrived, the Tonkawa camp was eerily silent. No one alive. They had died of smallpox, brought by white support. The charred bodies and pits showed they had tried to resist. Smallpox was deadly. To the tribe's touch meant death. Toshaway was right. He sent Eli alone to investigate. Whites had vaccines. Eli wouldn't be infected. Outside a cabin sat a man. As Eli approached, he woke up, begging for water. Eli gave him a drink from his canteen. With strength returned, the man revealed the horrible truth. Smallpox came from blankets gifted by white men. Realizing Eli wasn't Comanche, the man had a sinister idea. He asked Eli to bring those blankets back to the Comanche. Even a single item could wipe them all out. But Eli refused. He stripped down and washed thoroughly in the river, returning empty-handed. Charges the enemy mocked him and tried to pick a fight, but Toshaway stopped him. Even Prairie Flower didn't understand why he hadn't brought back food. Eli said, "Anything I brought would have killed you." Prairie Flower replied, "Without food, we'll die anyway." She didn't understand how fast smallpox would kill. Days later, Eli spotted a group of buffalo hunters. They were skinning hides and only eating prime meat. Compared to the starving Comanche, it was an impossible contrast. Eli suddenly ran out of the trees, shouting for help. The hunters saw this poor white boy. He claimed to have been enslaved by the Indians and begged for rescue. They believed him and promised to take him home after finishing work. Eli suddenly doubted his decision.
You better run.
Before the hunters could react, arrows flew through the air. The hunters fell. The Comanche rushed in. Though the hunters had guns, the surprise attack left them no time. The whites' reckless slaughter of buffalo had pushed the Comanche to the brink. They had no choice but to raid. After the last hunter was knocked out, charges the enemy ordered an inventory of the spoils. Suddenly, a woman burst from a tent, knocking him down in an attempt to escape. He quickly caught her and pinned her to the ground. Eli watched fellow whites now enduring what he once did. Guilt ate at him. The women and children of the tribe celebrated the spoils for survival. No one questioned where they came from. The white woman was given to charges the enemy's future father-in-law as a gift. The old man was delighted and now fully supported the marriage, but Prairie Flower loved Eli. Time was running out for Eli, yet guilt overwhelmed him. The captured hunters were mutilated, limbs removed, bodies nailed to the ground. The Comanche had ways to torture prisoners without killing them. That woman Ingrid would remain tied to Eli's fate for the next 60 years. It was her second time being captured, rescued from the Apache by the buffalo hunters. She thought freedom was near, but Eli had unknowingly led the Comanche to her. She hated him for it. Hearing the hunters' screams, Eli couldn't focus. He walked to the river to clear his head, but the cries haunted him. Even when Prairie Flower returned to his tent, he felt nothing, so she told him a story. They too had been hunted. Her sister had been killed by men like them for nothing but land. Eli awoke again to the cries. Death was now a luxury. He decided to help the hunter. He killed a snake by the river and squeezed venom into the man's mouth. The man swallowed it calmly. Death was a mercy. The woman kissed her pendant of faith and tossed it into the stream. As a slave to the tribe, pregnancy could come any day. Despair consumed her. Ingrid found the courage to end her own life with a dull knife. It was agonizing, but it brought release. Her consciousness faded. When she awoke, Eli was caring for her. She laughed bitterly. She couldn't even control her own life. Freedom had a price, maybe just a few horses or a bit of money, but they had nothing. Hopelessness crept in again. She looked at Eli with a mocking smile. She realized though both white, their fates were worlds apart. Eli was honored as a warrior. Ingrid was nothing more than an object of charity. And now, even Prairie Flower was angry with Eli. She told him Ingrid was part of the dowry. When Charges the enemy finished gathering the horses, Prairie Flower would no longer be his. But that wasn't the only bad news. Toshaway told Eli that Charges the enemy had recently tamed several horses and gifted them to Prairie Flower's father. Only a true warrior would win her hand. Charges the enemy summoned Prairie Flower to his tent, but she refused. Still, once he completed the dowry, she wouldn't be able to say no. Eli began distancing himself from Ingrid. The light in her eyes faded. When Prairie Flower approached, Ingrid quietly backed away. From a distance, Charges the enemy watched them both, his thoughts unreadable. A few days later, Charges the enemy and Eli discovered a herd of horses. Whoever tamed these horses would earn the right to marry Prairie Flower. But Charges the enemy didn't want Eli to have a fair chance. He shoved him off a cliff. To him, the horses meant Prairie Flower now belonged to him. If she ever visited Eli's tent again, he would have his nose cut off.
Outside, Tete.
Sume, namadoi. Sume yaka buku. Ayase semuya uriya toy.
Clearly, Toshaway didn't believe Eli would ever leave the tribe. He had long seen Eli as his own son. Tying a feather in a woman's hair meant she was now your wife for life. The Comanche wedding ceremony was simple. After burning sage, the father gave the daughter to the groom, draped them in a red blanket, and the marriage was done. From then on, the man had complete control over Prairie Flower's life and death. She had made her final effort, but she still couldn't find someone she could rely on. The man she loved. Maybe he really had gone back to the white man's world. Her father was old, and her stepmothers couldn't gather enough food. They needed a strong son-in-law to survive. That was the only contribution she could make to her family. But Eli hadn't died from the fall. He was lucky he only broke one leg. With no horse, returning to the tribe was nearly impossible. He struggled out of the valley and made himself a crutch. When he was thirsty, he drank water from buffalo tracks, draining the last drops for survival. As long as he stayed alive, there was hope, so he kept moving. He didn't know how far he'd gone when he saw someone down a slope in the distance. Unable to walk, he crawled toward them. Before he could get close, a woman pointed a gun at him. Even though he was dressed like a native, she could tell he was white. She bandaged his leg and offered to help him leave. But in those days, kindness could be dangerous. The woman was a fortune teller. She read Eli's fate and told him he'd one day become incredibly rich and achieve everything he dreamed of. Eli asked if he'd be able to marry the one he loved. She said yes, and that he'd have 3 strong and handsome sons. She agreed to lend him a horse to help him return to the Comanche. On the surface, the woman seemed kind, but in the middle of the night, she drugged Eli. When he woke up, he was tied to a wagon, his hands and feet bound. The woman revealed her true colors. From the start, she had only planned to sell him as a slave for a reward. Eli began to rub his ropes against the wagon slowly, but he had time. Under the blazing sun, he told the trafficker he was going to die of heat. The woman stopped the wagon after all. A dead slave wasn't worth much. As she prepared to cover him with a blanket, Eli struck. He had already broken free from his bindings. He grabbed her gun, got on a horse, and prepared to leave. The woman woke up and begged him to leave her the horse or the gun, completely forgetting what she had done to him. But Eli had no time for that. His mind was set on more important things. Prairie Flower was still waiting for him. Several days later, Eli finally returned to the tribe. He found Ingrid by a small stream. She looked like she'd just seen hope. But Eli wasn't there to take her away. She didn't understand he could have escaped. So why come back? Eli said, "This is my home." Ingrid was furious when she heard that. No one expected him to return, not even Toshaway, who looked at him like a proud father. Prairie Flower was already married. Eli could no longer approach her. 2 people who loved each other, yet couldn't be together. Both were now prisoners of fate. Eli had left with nothing, but returned with a gun and a horse. The elders agreed Eli had earned the right to be a Comanche. As one of them, he had to respect Charges the enemy's marriage to Prairie Flower. As for Charges the enemy's attempt to kill Eli, since Eli was still a slave at the time, Toshaway demanded 4 horses in compensation. Eli couldn't get over the fact that he was only worth 4 horses, while Toshaway just laughed with delight. Suddenly, a group of rangers charged at the Comanche. They hunted native scalps like trophies. Just as the Comanche hunted deer, the tribe fought back. Eli was shielded by the chief. Meanwhile, a white man chased after Charges the enemy, who had already been shot in the waist, but instead of killing him, the white man shot at each of his limbs, enjoying the sadistic pleasure. How pathetic that the greatest Comanche warrior was now humiliated by someone like that. It was said that losing your scalp meant you couldn't enter the afterlife. The soldier kicked over the wounded warrior and prepared to scalp him. Charges the enemy was too weak to resist. Just then, an arrow pierced the white man's body. Eli fired a second shot. Eli had just saved the man who once tried to kill him. The Comanche didn't fear death, what they feared was being scalped. In the end, charges the enemy didn't survive. Eli was furious. He grabbed the white man and tore off his scalp. It was Eli's first scalp, and it was from a white man. He had never imagined he'd do something like that one day. More and more white settlers poured into the land, and they would never stop. The conflict would only grow endlessly. I'm a movie enthusiast.